Hey everybody, I just want to make this quick tutorial to show you how I made those 3D buttons um, using only Elementor. So there are a lot of ways you could make this much cooler using JavaScript and CSS, but I just wanted to just make it using only Elementor. And really, I think you could I believe you can make this without Elementor Pro. I don't think I used any Pro features for this. So the basics of it are you're just creating three borders around that together make one button and then a shadow around that and then just tweaking the hover effects to make it look like it's being pressed. So to start, you're going to um, just make a section, and then this column is going to be your first border. Then you add in an intersection. It's going to give you two columns in that intersection. Delete one of them. And now, um, to make this, it's a lot easier if you can narrow it down, but for some reason, if you've only got one outer column, Elementor won't let you control the width percentage uh, without multiple columns. It will later, but not initially. So, because as you can see above, these are empty, and I can control the width. But at first, it makes this outer column 100%. So you're going to take your outer column and just duplicate it, and you can do it a few times. At that point, just select it, make it 10%. So now you've got this little button size button to work with. So uh, we've got the built-in padding that is in this instance is a pain. So just start from the outside and work your way in. So widget space 0, and now padding. If there's not a 0, it's putting padding in. So set that to 0. You can see it change. It changed that spacing. Now we work our way in more with our intersection, and I've got the navigator pulled up because everything starts to close in, and it gets difficult to select just the right part to edit. So um, now for this intersection, yeah, you have to do the same 0 for the padding, and then in your intersection inside your column. In this column, I left widget space set to 20 because I wanted space between the widgets, and I wanted a natural padding, but you could eliminate it. But for this, I just left it in. So now we start to add our elements. So one is an icon, and the other was just text. So we'll just do kind of like I did above, command. Now, this is obnoxious, and I wish it didn't happen in Elementor. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like any site I build, it does this. This big gap down here between command and the bottom edge, to eliminate that, let me make this lowercase. To eliminate that, switch to text, and then hit delete, and there it's gone. So I don't know why it's doing that, but it's annoying. So if you see that gap, because that gap will throw everything off, so go into the text mode and then just hit delete, and it gets rid of that line. And now I think the color's okay. We can adjust that later. Icon, we'll just do the apple again. And then we'll put it to the right, make it smaller, and then change its color to this dark gray. Actually, I'm going to change this to dark gray too. Okay, so now we've got kind of the skeleton of this button, um, or the guts of this button. So now, starting from the outside and working in, you don't have to, but if you start with the column and style, border, you're going to set the outermost radius to 14 and the inner radius to 12. If you change it too much, like if you make them match around the edges, you'll start to get a gap of white space where neither border is touching and it's just shooting all the way through to the background. So they can't be equal, but then they also can't be too far off for you to get the same problem. So I found that 14 and 12 work really well. So we'll set that to 14, solid. The width is 1 because this is just a gap around the button. And then solid black. So yeah, we've got an outline. And now this is the layer that contains the shadow, so this outer shadow. So sorry, my face is in the way. So if we want to make it a light shadow and make it coming down vertically, blur is pretty good, spread, outline. I actually want it to come down a little more vertically and a little more on the blur. And now for hover, so if we were pressing our button, we would want that shadow to get shorter and tighter because the button's tall, so the shadow would spread out more. So we're pushing a button, the shadow needs to get short and more compact. So switch into hover. You don't need to mess with this right now. Go to color. A little lighter, but not too much. And then we're going to shorten, make that the vertical needs to be not quite as much as it was before, and I actually don't remember what it was before. So yeah, so it's 6. So we're going to go to 4, and then our blur will make it tighter there. So you can already see when you hover over it, that shadow gets smaller, which is the goal. So now we've done that. The next step is going to be to create a button. So the top, the surface of the button. So I worked for the background of the intersection for this part, and just choose a gradient. I believe I made it a little darker towards the top, and then lighter towards the bottom. But just like subtly darker, you don't want to be crazy light and crazy dark. So actually, I have it right there. Let's just see what we're working with on here. Okay. All right. So now for this section, this is the next. So for this part, we come down to border. This border is the part, it would be the front and kind of the edge of the keys. So this is also where we run into the 12 versus 14 rule. So this border radius will be set to 12, and then solid. Now uncheck that you're linking all the values together because you don't want to do that. And we're going to leave the top at 0. right is 1, bottom is 5, and left is 1. And then change the color to um, a little bit darker gray than the background or the foreground or the surface of the button, but not super dark. So like not black, because you don't want it competing with the outline that you've made. So you have to play with this sometimes to kind of get an idea of what you want it to look like. So yeah, we've got that, and if I click off of it, you can kind of see a little bit. So now you can see there's this bottom border that's wrapping around. So this is border 1, 2, and then we haven't gotten to 3 yet. So before we do, let's adjust the hover border. So the border will still be 12, still be solid, and now we want to make this border be the same. Okay, so the same. We want this border to be 1, 1, and 1 instead of 1, 5, 1, so that when you hover it, it shrinks. So this is an issue. When you've gotten this far and you've actually got it to shrink, it pulls on everything else on the page, because you're just making 4 pixels vanish, so it's pulling from the bottom and from the top, and so we'll fix that in this next part. So now we'll move on to the innermost column, and this is where we add this top, very light top of the key shadow or border. It's not a shadow. So just like we did before, go in solid, radius 12, because it's the intersection of the key. Unlink, and then top is set to 1, and then we'll make that white, and you can take it off white just a tiny bit if you want. And so yeah, if we save that and then take a look, now we've got our button, and it is pressing, because you can see the shadow is reducing in size, and the bottom border, that key border, the key edge, is now disappearing, but it's still pulling everything else on the page. So to fix that, I found the easiest thing to do is on this same column section is to go into hover and tell it to have a border of 2 pixels top and bottom. So unlink, and then 2, and then 2, and then that should stop it from pulling everything else. It should only pull essentially on itself. And then set that border, of course, to be transparent. Now, this does do one thing, and some might think it's good and some might think it's bad. It gets rid of, because you're telling the intersection that contains that white line across the top where the light would be hitting it, you're telling it to go away and become transparent. I think that works, because if I press a button, it's going to change how the light's hitting it anyways. So I think it works. It's kind of one of the limitations of doing this all without code is that we're limited to what we can do. So let's see what that did. Make sure that didn't do anything weird. So yeah, still pulling on the top. Okay, sorry for, I had to pause there. So what I found was that I actually needed, it was still pulling on the top and the bottom by having a 2 pixel border top and bottom, but for some reason when I changed the pixel top to 3 and the bottom to 2, it quit doing it. So you might have to play around with some of those settings. Because yeah, I don't. None of the others do that. Just this one. So if it's still pulling the rest of the page, give it one more pixel of padding, and it appears that does the trick. So yeah, at this point we've got a functional button. This top layer here, this gap, as you can see, that's just the editor, because here on the page it's not doing that. One thing I did up here was I made it so when you hover or push the button, the gradient changes or goes away. I kind of like this better where I didn't do that. It almost looks like just by making the border change, by making that top white line go away and leaving it gray with the transparent border, it almost looks more natural. But yeah, that's basically it. There's there's really nothing else that. Oh, I see one difference. So this is, again, it's just borders. So you'll notice this border here, when you hover it, it goes from nothing to something, whereas this one, there's a little bit of a black line. So you could change that, going to that outer border and taking the top down to 0. Oop, unlink them first. and then on hover, make it so that, on hover, make it so that all the borders show up, so that it's hidden from view. It looks like it's hidden from view, and then when you press it, it shows up. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you could change. And again, just changing the different gradients on the background make it look a lot different, or on the foreground. I've been trying to think of how this could be used practically, because it's a cool effect, but it doesn't do anything. I think, kind of this keyboard effect. I've been trying to think of how that could be used. Maybe have like a return key that looks like an actual return key or an enter key, to trigger a form would be really cool. Because yeah, at this point it's just look what I can do. It doesn't actually help anybody. But I think incorporating different keys into like form submissions or different actions would be neat. I don't know. Let me know if you guys think what you think, or if you see any way it could be improved. I'm sure there's a lot of ways it could be improved. But yeah, just let me know. Thanks.